We have a bathroom cleaning schedule at work. Weird start, right? We have a bathroom cleaning schedule at work. And it's everybody's job to help clean the bathroom. But before it got organized and put onto a list, it's hung on the back of the door, didn't really work. So we put that list up. Everybody takes turns. And some people do it happily and in service. I don't know about happily, but they do it willingly and in service. Some people don't do it, whether they forgot or they just don't want to do it. And then some complain about doing it or complain about others who don't do it or didn't do it. Now, Dempsey's, I'm spoiled rotten. That's a great place to work. We get to pray every morning before we start work. It's a great place, a great environment with great people, but it still needs improvement and needs work. Always needs improvement and work. What about the church? As we'll look this morning in Ephesians 4, in fact, if you'll turn there, Ephesians chapter 4, or click there, swipe, whatever it is you do. Ephesians 4 and verse 11, I'll meet you there in a few moments. What about the church? Jesus established and set up the church for success. Everyone had a role and they were expected to work together for the good of all to build up this church that Jesus was establishing and setting up. And Jesus left that same mission with you and me. In fact, he trusted us with that mission. So everyone has a role and it's organized. Some do what's expected and they're happy to do it. They're willing to do it in service. Some don't. Whether they forget it's their responsibility or they just don't want to work in the church. Some complain about the work in the church and complain about others who aren't doing it. Is the church the greatest family on earth? Absolutely. Are we blessed to have this from God himself? Absolutely. This is some of the greatest people, the greatest environment, but it still needs work and improvement. So whose turn is it? That's the question with the bathroom, right? Whose turn is it? If you think that I got together with Chris and we decided to powwow and work with each other on these lessons, that this is a continuation after you hear it of Sunday night, you'd be wrong. I don't know about the providence of God in the present. I can look back on the past. That's the point of faith, but maybe it is God's providence. We'll see what that determines. This morning we're going to talk about Jesus establishing the church in Ephesians chapter 4 and what that looked like. And then we're going to talk about how that's been turned over to you and me in Hebrews chapter 10 for a few moments. I want to start with 11 common useless thoughts. And I'm going to come back to those and address those later on. These, somewhere in there, will probably sting at one point or another. And I stand in front of you and tell you that I am not preaching to you and talking to you. I stand in need of improvement. I see my weaknesses. I was impacted by the Bible and Chris's presentation of it Sunday night, and I see where I need work as well. I decided or thought about this and asked some people for their input simply because I've seen in the past little while how we come up to the very end of time trying to fill teachers in our congregation. And we'll talk about that. More so tonight. If you want to hear the conclusion of this sermon, we're going to talk about application tonight. How you can get involved, ways in which, how you can find out what your gifts are and use those and develop them further and look to develop even more abilities. But let's start with these 11 common useless thoughts. Number one is, I'm waiting for the elders to decide. Number two is, well, nobody asked me, nobody invited me, nobody included me. Number three is, this is the way we've always done it. Number four, well, the church needs to, or we need to, X, Y, and Z. Number five, it's not my thing. It's just not my thing. Number six, well, nobody else seems interested. Number 7, we need more people before we can do this. Number 8, it's somebody else's job. It's the young people's job. It's the older people's job. It's the preacher's job. It's the elder's job. It's the ladies. It's the men. Number 9, he or she is faithful. They're here every time the doors are open. Number 10, we need more programs. And finally, number 11, and I'm not saying this is a sin, so don't you dare run past me on this. We'll just put up a sign-up sheet. Jesus set the church up for success. Ephesians chapter 4. Now, he promised that, and he talked about building that when he first revealed that what he was going to go to Jerusalem and suffer and die in Matthew chapter 16 in that context. In verse 18, that proclamation by him, I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build, I will establish, I will set up my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Well, that didn't just mean that Jesus was going to set it up, build it, and walk away. He actually put people into place and organized the church, and Ephesians 4 talks about that. And watch Paul explain how he did this. Let's read together. Ephesians chapter 4, I'm in the New King James Version. He himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but, speaking the truth in love, may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. You see, he set people in place to completely furnish the church. What I'm going to do is tell you what word these associate with. And when I say words, things like completely furnish and refer to equipping, what I did is went back to the Greek to try to open these words up a little bit more so that we don't just skip past them. So when he says he equipped the church, Paul says Jesus equipped the church. He completely furnished the church and made it what it ought to be. And he used apostles and prophets and evangelists and elders and teachers, 3 of which still operate today, are still part of the roles in the church today. Those people were to occupy themselves. That's what's behind the word work in this text. They were to occupy themselves with service that would meet the needs of the kingdom. That's ministry. They were to work and minister to the better of the whole, this congregation of the church and the kingdom. So it was to build up and grow the church. That's what edify is in this text. It was to bring about this finished product. What that finished product looked like, well, he says in the text, until we all come to a unity of the faith, until we come to a unity of the knowledge of the Son of God, so that the church would be full grown and lacking nothing. That's that perfect man that he inserts there in the New King James, that will be full grown and mature. And so what does he mean by that? Well, apostles and prophets helped us bring this completion to the church through the work of the Holy Spirit, and mostly providing knowledge and verifying that knowledge with these miraculous works. In Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 20 talks about that, saying, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. So there was this building process until we could all come to this unity of faith, unity of knowledge, and then those offices, if you will, if I could use that term, were no longer necessary. Apostles and prophets and the things that they could do were no longer necessary to validate, because the complete or the perfect had come. Notice 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I'll read it for you if you don't want to turn. 1 Corinthians 13, 8 through 10, in the context, the bigger context I don't have time to go into right now. He says, love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. We know in part at that time and prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect, and what it means behind that word, the complete, when the complete has come, then that which is in part will be done away. And brethren, this is the complete. That's why there's no more need for apostles and prophets, because that was part of Jesus establishing the church and building it up until we had this unity of faith and unity of knowledge. Now, in the text in Ephesians, I know I'm going fast. I have a lot of information. I'm reading more than I'd like to, but I want to make sure I get these things right this morning. Notice the other illustrations. He joined her members like a building and compacted the people together. That's the knit word there. So he joined us together. He compacted and knit the people together according to what every ligament, joint contributes. So if you are building a structure, everyone is necessary. In that text in Ephesians 2, Jesus is that chief cornerstone. So all those that he put in place were part of that building, knit, compacted together so that every joint, every ligament has a role, a purpose, a part, and is necessary. And this does what? Well, first of all, notice he says here in our text, the effective working. If you go back, he says, from whom the whole body joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working. When I looked that up, I didn't realize that this is the superhuman power that only Jesus can provide. So according to his effective work in establishing the church, each one, each part, plays its assigned role appropriately, does its share. And this is in the beginning, the foundational aspect of building up the church that he has established. And this causes growth of the body and building itself up in love. That was the original. And I'm here to tell you that formula still works. Every one of you has abilities given by God. So the question is, am I going to invest? And I want that word to stick with you today. Am I going to invest my abilities to serve the church and to build it up? Because it still needs work. As great as it is, it's full of imperfect humans. And am I going to be part of those solutions? And each one of us has to play our role for the church to continue as Jesus established it. So Jesus established the church, set it up, built it up, and Jesus' followers continue that success. Hebrews chapter 10. I'm asking you to turn there. Hebrews chapter 10, popular passage. One verse is used over and over and over, sometimes to the exclusions of others, but they all fit together in a bigger context. Hebrews is a letter that explains the greatness and superiority of Jesus, intermingled with instructions and warnings when you read through this letter, this book. So after explaining the greatness of Jesus' sacrifice, the writer explains our boldness in Jesus, the high priest, the one and only forevermore. And then these instructions follow. This is what I am to do with that. Notice here in verse 22, Hebrews 10:22. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience, our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider one another. Let us consider one another to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. So there are instructions here in this small section of verses that are for you, what you need to do for you. And then there are instructions of what you need to do and what you owe and what you're responsible for and I'm responsible for everyone else, for the good of the church. First of all, he says, come to God. You know, we talk about that at times, and I've been guilty in the past as well, as talking about drawing near to God or coming to God as something you do in the very beginning. You come to God, and then you're there with him. When you realize the verb tense is behind this drawing near to God, it is a process, a lifelong process of getting closer and closer to God. And the way you draw near to God, or what has to be in place in order to do this, is that your heart. Stop for a minute, because we need to put some extra into this, because we could just say heart and we say, oh yeah, we know, everybody knows what heart is. When you look into the Greek, here's what's included in this definition of a word that's translated heart for us in the English. The heart, which is the seat of your thoughts, passions, desires, appetites, affections, purposes, and endeavors. Your heart has to be real and genuine. That's what he means by true. My heart has to be real and genuine. Everything that I'm about that makes up my heart, that list of things, has to be genuine, dedicated, and true to God. And you can only do this, listen closely, you can only do this with a conviction of truth that results in obedience. That's faith. He says the full assurance of faith. Well, that full assurance, most certain conviction. So this conviction, this belief that results in action and obedience, gives me this confidence, this full assurance, this conviction. And your heart, talking to those who are not members of the Lord's church, before you can ever draw near to God, your heart has to have been purified from an evil conscience, and you have to be washed with that pure water. You have to obey the gospel, be immersed, baptized into Christ in order to draw near to God. So that's what he's telling me to do and how to do so. Then he says, continue to keep a firm grasp. That's hold fast in your New King James. Keep a firm grasp on what? The confident expectation that you profess. Keep a firm grasp on the confident expectation that you profess. That is, hold fast your confession of hope. Hope is this expectation. And I'm going to cling to that. Now, what do I do with it? How do I continue on? What's my responsibility to you? For the church, he says, consider. The English just doesn't bear out the Greek sometimes, because the Greek, God knew what he was doing. He doesn't need my approval, but he knew what he was doing using such a precise language in the right time, the Greek. And so sometimes we have to go back to the original. You don't have to be a professional with the original language, but now the resources are available everywhere so that you can see some of the background of these words. If I say consider, you might say, well, I considered going to lunch today, or I considered going to this place for lunch. But what does it really mean in the original? Attentively, this is what you can find. Attentively keep your eyes and your mind focused, in this case, on others. Consider each other. Keep your eyes and your mind focused on other people. Then you'll have a better idea of how to do what? To provoke, to incite, to urge them to love and good works. My responsibility to you and ours to each other is, how do I provoke you to love more and to do more for the Lord? To urge you, to incite you to do these things. Then he gives you a do not. Do not abandon or desert. That's this neglect here. Do not abandon or desert the gathering of yourself with brethren. Don't forsake the assembling together. Don't abandon that, as is the habit of some, the bad habit of some. Instead, calling them to be with you, even pleading with them. This is all behind the word exhorting. Calling with them to be with you, even pleading with them, so that you can encourage and strengthen them. Come be with me. Let's spend some time together. I want to build you up. I need to provoke you to love and good works, but I also need to encourage you and build you up. And the only way to do that is if I don't neglect time with you. Spending time with each other. Even more willingly and ready, because we know what day's coming. Hebrews is a warning in many ways in this passage. In chapter 3, about how we owe each other because of what's coming. And if you want to see, we won't take the time this morning to look through it, but if you want to see what we stand to lose, keep reading. 26 and following. Who we'll have to face if we go on sinning willfully. So we see Jesus has built the church in very few words, so to speak, in one passage. We've seen our responsibility to the Lord's church, and now we come back to these 11 common useless thoughts and apply them through this filter, if you will. So let's spend the rest of our time on this, answering the common useless thoughts. I am waiting for the elders to decide. Well, the elders have their role, and certainly you have yours as well, but don't cop out by asking permission for what God has already told you to do. Now, keep the elders in the loop. They are our shepherds. They are concerned about this congregation. They are concerned about your soul and my soul. It doesn't mean go off cavalier, but stop waiting for somebody to okay what God has already told you to do. We'll come back to more of that in just in fact, we'll come back here. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 3 tells the elders not to lord over us, to be masters over us. Well, don't push them into that position. where they have to make all your decisions and you can't move without them or their approval. Again, keep them in the loop. They have wisdom. They care about us. They are our shepherds and leaders, but don't use them as a cop-out. Next is nobody asked me, nobody invited me, and nobody included me. I don't understand this one. If you want to do something, do it. I've had people complain before that I wasn't invited to camp. You didn't tell anybody you wanted to be there. Jesus has told you. You could say he's asked you. Jesus has told you what he wants you to do. Jesus has invited you. Jesus has included you. What else do you need? But these are the common things we hear at times that ease our minds about not getting involved and not doing, and shove the responsibility off onto someone else. Stop waiting for somebody else to invite, to include, to ask, and take some initiative. Number 3, this is one that's going to get me in trouble, right? Well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, I hear brethren flip out if you talk. Look, there are non-variables in the Bible that we don't get to change. Why? Because God commanded them. Then there are variables that come up by opinion, and those, mine are as good as yours. And we sort of collectively decide together, and we have the elders to lead us as well. But we've always done it this way. Well, doing things the same way over and over can sometimes put you into a rut and encourage apathy. Some of it, and I'm not saying it's just congregational wide. We are autonomous, but I have seen a lot of different congregations who refuse to do something simple as change the order of worship because people freak out. Same stuff, just moved around. Not disorderly, not chaos, but if we change that around, but yet that's a simple way, and I'm just giving you an example, that's a simple way of how to keep us from just going through the motion. We do this here, we do this now, check, 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 out the door. So the excuse of this is the always how we've done it. Well, I'm here to tell you the world has changed. It has changed drastically. And we can adapt to that without breaking God's rules at all. Change is not an unholy word when it's for the better of us in the congregation and those that we're trying to reach. Fourth, the church needs to, we need to, yada, yada, yada. I have used this. I have used some of these before, so my toes hurt before yours because I put this together. The church needs to. That's groupthink. Groupthink is all right because the Bible talks in groupthink at times, but when groupthink is used and abused as an excuse, when groupthink is used this way, it becomes an excuse, basically. And so you have quotes that I remember from James Meadows at the School of Preaching years ago. What's everybody's job is nobody's job. The church needs to. We need to. Well, what's everybody's job is nobody's job. And if not you, this was his other quote, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? And I have done the same things, brethren. I have talked about, I have thought about, I have sort of planned in my head and never did anything about it. So instead of saying the church needs to, we need to, say I need to. Fill in. Stop looking for somebody else to start. It's not my thing. I heard this from an elder's wife, not here. You have to put that disclaimer out quickly. I heard this from an elder's wife years ago who was rather cantankerous. And she said, well, evangelism isn't my thing. Well, let me say, whatever you think is not your thing and it's God's thing, then heaven's not going to be your thing either. It's not my thing. You know, it may not fall within your capabilities or your abilities or your role, so to speak, but you can encourage others to fill that role. Maybe it's too far out of your comfort zone, but you can provoke somebody else to step into that role. How can I encourage them and build them up? Maybe I can stretch myself out of what I think I can and can't do. It's not my thing. You can also challenge yourselves, as I said, to learn new abilities. Josh Harrison, who I would not dare embarrass, is a student at the School of Preaching. If you would have told him, me, or anybody that knew Josh 2 years ago, He would be in the school of preaching. He would be standing up to preach. We'd have said, nope, not him. Josh is an all-day worker. He is quiet. If you knew his history, you would appreciate his faith even more in his dedication to Christ. But he said, I've got to teach my son that he needs to stretch himself, that he needs to step out and lead. What better way than to dedicate my life completely to the Lord in this work? I love it. I'm so encouraged by Josh Harrison because he's pushing beyond what he thought his boundaries were. The next one, I guess I'm at number 6. Well, nobody else seems interested. Hell, nobody else seemed interested in building an ark besides Noah and his family. Can you imagine? Nobody else is interested. I ain't build no boat. That's the mentality. We got this dumb idea in our heads that we need a big group of people in order to do it. And that's where programs fail. We're going to have this program, and there's a bunch of people who are interested at first, and then it dies off. And then we say, well, that was a failure. Meanwhile, and I don't want to embarrass again, but we have a ladies group that you may or may not know about who meets, I think, every Monday night. 2 or 3 people, women got together and said, we're going to pray every week together. And if we have 2 or 3 of us, great. If we have 30 of us, great, but we're going to keep it going. I was in contact with a man named Jesse King. I've told you about him. And it was good contact yesterday because we're Texas fans, and they beat Oklahoma. So I heard from him. But I remember Jesse King with 2 other men when I was the preacher at Rocky Creek, and we sat down and we said, we're going to get together and we're going to go visit brethren. We're going to come up with a plan of what to say and what scriptures to use for those brethren who are strong. We're going to come up with a plan of what to say for those brothers who are struggling. Then we're going to go visit the ones you don't necessarily want to, the ones who have fallen away, and we're going to talk to them. And if it's the 4 of us, if it's 2 of us, if it's 25 of us, we're going to go do it. Stop with this mentality that we need more people in order to get it done. In fact, go back in your Bibles and read how great things God did with just a few people. Nobody seems interested. Don't limit the impact. Listen to me closely. Don't limit the impact your interest and excitement can have. We sing it only takes a spark, right? To keep a fire going, just be the spark. Start somewhere. We need more people. 10 to 90%, right? That's the usual. 10% of the people in the church doing 90% of the work. My response lately to that has been, then be part of the 10% and stop whining. Some of us who are workers in the church whine too much about what other people are not doing. Instead of looking to go to those people who are not doing and say, how can I provoke them to love and good works? How can I edify and encourage them? Be part of the 10%, and let's see if we can change those numbers. And if Jesus was talking percentages on the Sermon on the Mount, when he was gathered on the mountain, or he was on a mountain, had a crowd gathered around him, and starts, if you will, begins his ministry with a horrible ratio in Matthew 7 about how few people are going to find the narrow way, many will find the broad way. If he was worried about ratios, he would have quit then. So be part of the 10%. If you're thinking we need more people, start provoking somebody else. The next one, it's somebody else's job. It's the young, the older. Listen, we didn't hire Chris to do your job. We didn't appoint elders and deacons to do your job. They have roles, but that's not so you can slough off and say, well, it's somebody else's responsibility. If we stopped ignorantly thinking, I'm going to talk to the men right now. If we stopped ignorantly thinking that the kiddie classes belong to the women, some of us would step up and realize that these young kids need to see men as well in teaching these classes. If older people would stop talking about how much they've done in the past, and I'm leaving it to I've heard this plenty of times, not necessarily here, but if older people would stop talking about how much they've done and leaving it to the kids and the young people need to do more. I haven't read the Christian retirement plan in the Bible. I haven't seen it. And young people, you need to stop despising your own youth and get to work. There are people who are needed here. The church does not revolve around you having a good time and providing for you as well. And I am going to challenge us here. We may not have a big teen group, but you see all these little kids. Some of them are missing today. You see all these little kids. They need guidance. They need someone to step in. And you could do the usual. We need a youth minister. No, we don't. We need dedicated brothers and sisters. And the more would be better so we could share the responsibility. It's somebody else's job. By the way, can I say this too? Can I stop and drive home here? The church, the elders are not your personal 911. You have seen these people call 911? Oh, somebody offended me. I'm calling the police. And you go. They're not in danger. The elders are certainly there for you if there is a problem. If you have an issue, please call on them. But for your personal pettiness, they are not your 911. I'm going to tell you about Rocky Creek. I was privileged to serve there as a minister. I had 4 wonderful elders, great men. And what they would do is, this is what a lot of brethren want. What they want to do is they want to complain about somebody, and they want to go tell the elders. And what they say is, don't tell them I told you so. Let's do this anonymously. Right? And what you're encouraging, brethren, what you're trying to get the elders to do is encourage gossip. I want to tell you, because I want to lift up these elders and so many great men like our 4 we have here who I believe in and love dearly. But so these men, they would have this group that decided they would come tell them, and many times make up things that I had done or hadn't done. And the elders would come to me and say, we had a complaint. And I say, well, who is it? Because I can't work out what I don't know. Well, we can't tell you that. But we have a complaint. Well, to their, I'm looking for my word here, to their, to say good about them, because my word left me. To say good about them, I told them, I said, gentlemen, I love you, but I can't keep doing this. I can't have you harboring what these people have to say, and I don't have the chance to work this out. They're not using Matthew 18 whatsoever. They came back the next time and said, we got more complaints, but we told them they need to work it out, and if nothing's done, in 2 weeks, we're all going to get together and talk about it. You know what happened to the complaints? Way down. But they are not your personal go-to when something you don't like is going on. Next is he or she is faithful. They're here every time the doors are open. Now, some of you are sitting back going, what's wrong with that? When did we reduce faith to a 4-hour-a-week encapsulation? Oh, every time the doors are open. Woohoo, 4 hours a week. That must be faithful. When is that not neglecting? If that's all, that's the bare minimum. I don't see anywhere where Jesus says, do the bare minimum, where God says, do the bare minimum. And sometimes we reduce faith by saying things like this. If we're here 4 hours, can we still not be neglecting each other? I've asked you this before. If I'm a 4-hour-a-week dad, you go, good job. He's on it. He's a great dad. 4-hour-a-week husband. What I'm saying is we have to get together outside of these walls. And look, if you don't see or interact or deal with your brethren outside of these walls, Hebrews 10:25 is talking to you, even if you're here every time the doors are open. Stop waiting for an elder-appointed church function. Start getting together. I have to do this. I'm not doing this to embarrass him because it was funny and I thought it was funny. Mike handed me a visitation card this morning. If you're here, you know I'm not here half the time because I like to preach and I get the opportunities. But you know that doesn't mean that I get to exit myself from my responsibilities. I need to have people over to our house. I need to get people there and let's talk. Do you remember, how many of you, don't raise your hands or anything, but how many of you remember in old days when it was common to leave Wednesday night and go to somebody's house and you didn't have a smorgasbord or this planned out meal, but they were together. They were either having a good time, sometimes Bible study, sometimes singing, but it was usually every Wednesday night and Sunday night. So let's stop limiting ourselves to these 4 hours and start building from that. What about we need more programs? Well, find me the program instructions in the Bible. I'm not saying they're a sin. They can be good, but people will say things like, we need a youth program, we need this kind of program, and programs are sometimes put in place to get a group of people to do what they won't do individually, and they usually don't really work out too well. I was given this quote this past week, and I like this. Hear this out. The church was never intended to be a volunteer organization. Excuse me. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. I got ahead of myself. In fact, this goes up with the last one. We'll put up a sign-up sheet. Oh, I know. We do sign-up sheets, and I see the glares coming back. Don't get me. I'm not saying anything's wrong with a sign-up sheet. It can be good, but I want to challenge that mentality. It has some merit, but a lot of times they're put up so we don't have to ask people or make them feel pressured. Man, I'd be much more likely, just as a human being, as a Christian, I'd be much more likely to come along and do what you needed me to do. If you walked up and said, you know what, I'd like you to X, Y, and Z. And it's not for men that have to do that either. But if any one of you walked up to me and said, I'd like you to fill in here and do this, that's much more effective. Here's the quote I was going to give you. The church was never intended to be a volunteer organization, yet unfortunately we've made it such. A sign-up sheet doesn't provoke words of encouragement. Equipping someone to fill a role, urging them on, does exactly that. So I'm challenging us. Came prepared today. What are the conclusions? What do you do with all this information? You look at what Jesus established, Ephesians 4:11-16, the way he set it up, the way it was supposed to work together just to be established. You look at Hebrews 10, look at the responsibility that you have to that design in the church. And then you ask yourself, am I living up to this responsibility that Jesus left me or entrusted me with until he comes back? And I've said I have improvements to make. You have improvements to make. Some of you are filling these roles and working on these improvements. Everybody's going to fall within these categories. Some of you are filling these roles and working on these improvements. Some of you are showing up and just complaining or talking. And some of you are just showing up, and some barely doing that. There's no investment. You're checking boxes. Like taking a piece of cracker and a little bit of juice on Sunday morning is going to clear everything. It's going to mean you are at church and with the church. What are you going to do about it right now? Whatever your state is. If you are barely showing up, are you willing to repent and dedicate yourself to the greatest cause on earth? Because we haven't even touched why the church exists. That's to go out and reach the lost. We're just talking about building it up. So if you're barely showing up, are you willing to repent today and say, I will invest. I'm going to get involved. No more excuses, no more cop-outs, no more useless thoughts or useless thinking. I'm going to get involved. If you're just talking or complaining, are you ready to repent and finally put some action behind those words and those thoughts? I am. Not because I'm great, because I'm convicted this morning. I need to do more. And I am repenting in front of you and telling you, I need more. We need to pray for each other and give to ourselves, die worn out in the work of the Lord, of the church. And if you're doing your share, are you ready to grab somebody else by the hand and provoke them to do theirs? If need be, to rebuke or to reprove or whatever the case, so that you can help hold them. He was talking about instructive discipline this morning, and sometimes corrective discipline. Sometimes that is reproving and rebuking to bring people along. Don't complain about what they're not doing. Don't act as though they're lepers outside of the camp. Try to bring them along as well. It's our responsibility. And if you're not part of the Lord's church this morning, you've heard some insights about who we are here. But I don't want you to walk away. That's why I told you about Dempsey's. This is one of the greatest places to work ever. There is no group of people you can belong to that's better than the Lord's church. It has its problems. We have our insufficiencies. But we're not giving up. It's worth it. So I don't want you to misunderstand if you're listening online, or if you see this later, if you're here with us this morning. I don't want you to misunderstand if you're not a Christian. Why would I sign up for all that? We are just human beings, imperfect, trying to be perfect and trying to help each other. And we always need improvement.